Hey everyone, it's John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn lesson on the home front and total war. This is from our World War I series. So we're coming off the battlefield for once today, and we'll look at how World War I kind of affected the societies in which it was taking place. So we're going to look at the context and the causes of the changes which were happening on the societal level today. Then we'll give you a really good chronology, as we always do, to beef up your notes. And then we'll look at a nice turning point as well in terms of the home front and total war. And then, as always, we'll round off nicely by looking at the tertiary, secondary and primary significance of the events on the home front in World War I. So first off then, let's have a nice look at the context and causes. What was kind of driving the home front changes in this period? So let's have a look then. Well, first off, there was an overarching concept that started to be developed kind of implicitly almost at the start of called total war. So basically it was this was full-on industrialized war. Okay, this was very, very intense. So we're going to need to mobilize whole societies and whole countries here, which had never been done before. So victory required diverting all national resources, your industry, agriculture, workforce, finance, everything you've got here towards the military effort. And that concept is called total war. Okay, so everything was being pushed towards winning World War I. And you can kind of see that actually in the video with kind of women joining the workforce, which was a revolutionary concept as well, working in munitions factories and stuff. So it was starting to dislocate and change society and how it actually operated with the concept of total war. And also with this concept, it blurred the front line. Civilians now became essential contributors to the war, making factories, cities and supply lines legitimate strategic targets. Civilians started to die as well, up to a certain point. And so the front line and the distinction between military and civilian started to break down and at least become quite blurred. Okay. Then, number 2. State control and DORA in 1914, which we'll talk about in a second. So, first off then, the Defence of the Realm Act, or DORA, is quicker to write in your exams, granted the British government unprecedented emergency powers to control daily life and protect national security. So democracy starts to get eroded a little bit, and the British government, through DORA, starts to act in a bit more of a dictatorial fashion because of total war. We need everything. The rules don't apply now because it's either that or potentially lose World War I. So we need to suspend some democratic kind of safeguards. So that's important. You can obviously look into that act in more detail. Nationalisation of industry as well. So the government actually seized direct control of key industries which were going to be needed for the military victory. Coal mines, railways, shipping, armaments factories. The government stepped in to control them rather than letting the market forces dictate, because that wouldn't have been efficient enough for war here. So that massive nationalisation of industry is another socio-economic change, which was very, very profound in this period. And then what else is driving the home front and total war? Well, this is one which was not popular at all for understandable reasons. So food shortages and rationing. So there was a U-boat economic threat, especially against Britain. German unrestricted submarine warfare threatened Britain's arteries and supply lines, and ultimately our food imports coming from our colonies in Canada, but also with America as well, a friendly nation. And it caused severe panic buying and soaring prices by 1917 because food was getting gradually squeezed as the merchantmen were getting sank in the Atlantic. So initially Britain brought in, as we normally do, we go by half measures. So they brought in a kind of voluntary food scheme. Public didn't want to know anything about that, to be honest. So then by 1918 there's compulsory rationing. Okay, as you can see in the picture, So ration cards were introduced for essential staples like sugar, meat, butter, which we all take for granted now, obviously, and lard, to ensure fair distribution across social classes. There was still a little bit of a black market, so if you had the money, you could kind of, jump the queue almost. But rationing became a thing by the end of the war, or the last year or two. And again, that's a massive state intervention in the home front that the public would have felt on a daily basis, because you really had to watch your calorie intake. It was difficult. So those are three of the big pieces of context for me that were affecting the home front and total war. Now let's move to a really nice chronology, just so you can get some of these notes down in more detail and into your notes. Okay. Right, so let's have a look then. So August 1914 then, so pretty much at the start of the war, we have the passing of DORA, the Defence of the Realm Act. So effectively then, here, what that does is it grants emergency powers to the British government, sweeping rights to censor newspapers, seize land and requisition it if needed, and control resources. They have dictatorial powers effectively. Daily life restrictions as well. So pub opening times. Oh no, the pubs, as you can see in the image, pubs were kind of like had their opening times curtailed. Fireworks were banned, and instituted British summertime to save coal. Okay, so it's all about conserving resources and marshalling everybody to the war effort. Total war, to be honest. Anti-espionage as well, so strict laws were prevented spreading war rumours or taking photos of naval ports and railway bridges, which seems fairly reasonable, to be honest, but there was a big fear of German spies. Then moving forward, number 2 across the home front was in my opinion, quite a big event actually. So we have in May 1915, we have the shells crisis, and a Ministry of Munitions was set up. So let's break that apart. So basically in 1915, there was an ammunition shortage. Frontline reports revealed a critical shortage of high explosive artillery shells on the Western Front. Now that's important because it will get our soldiers killed, because if you can't soften up the German positions with enough artillery, then our lads have to go over the top and get mown down, and so casualty figures will be unacceptably high. So Lloyd George stepped in because this created big political issues. So David Lloyd George, who's in the image, was appointed Minister of Munitions to completely restructure British manufacturing. Okay, so we actually create a ministry for artillery and bullets and things like that. So we become much more professional. State factories as well. So we built dozens of national shell factories, converting civil manufacturing into full-scale war production for these artillery shells, so the shell crisis wouldn't happen again. Okay, massive kind of movement there. Then we have women entering the workforce and conscription. Again, highly unpopular with a lot of people. So the Munitionettes, so over 1 million women joined armaments factories handling very dangerous TNT explosives. Okay, so this is serious work. We're not messing around here, and they were very brave. As you can see in the image, I think that's a nice illustration, but women in the workplace was, I wouldn't quite say a revolutionary concept, but it was definitely evolutionary, and you can see that total war is changing our society and the way in which society operated. The land army as well, so women replaced male farm workers in agriculture to boost domestic food production, because obviously the men were at the front line fighting and dying. So effectively the women had to pick up the slack to keep the food production high. And Military Service Act in 1916, so that ended voluntary enlistment. This is very important, and it introduced mandatory conscription for men aged 18 to 41. Okay, so effectively a broad sweep of male population now will be forced to join the army. You will not have a choice, and again, fairly unpopular measure, but this is total war, so you have to scrape up every single able-bodied person within the age range to be able to replace casualties on the Western Front. So massive changes. And then lastly, as we kind of alluded to there, let's just get that lined up nicely. So January 1918, then we have the dreaded rationing and the 1918 Franchise Act. Let's unpick this because these are big changes as well. So compulsory rationing then, so sugar, meat, butter and lard, animal fats basically, were strictly rationed using official government coupons. Okay, so, and you can kind of see kind of elements were quite very tightly controlled. Social equality, up to a point. Rationing eliminated panic buying queues, ensuring that the poor working class families received equal food supplies. Okay, like I say, there was a bit of a black market like there always is, so the rich could still supplement with luxuries, but generally it ensured working class got their fair share of calories. And also on top of this, there were votes for women, which again, that is a revolutionary change in this period. So the Representation of the People Act in 1918 gave votes to all men over 21 and women over 30. You can still see there's not quite equality, who met certain property rules. Now, it's not full enfranchisement, full democracy, but it was a big step forward for women's kind of democratic rights. And in terms of a turning point then, we kind of teased it out a little bit. And I think for me on the home front, I think the shells crisis of May 1915 and the creation of the Ministry of Munitions was crucial to stop events like this happening. And you'll see when they run out of shells on the Western Front.
We need more shells! This is the last one!
And then what do? You can't soften up the enemy trenches and you can't actually kind of fight properly. So I do think the shells crisis was a big turning point on the home front because it created the Ministry of Munitions and it led to full-scale industrial reorganisation. So it shifted Britain from a free market economy where businesses in the market just do what they want within reason, to a centralised state-managed war machine. That's a massive change, and it goes against capitalist logic as well. It led as well, the shells crisis, to a firepower triumph. It ensured that Allied armies, once we'd reorganised ourselves, were fully supplied with artillery shells for pretty much the remainder of the war, and we never ran out again up to a point. There was no other massive shells crisis, and so we could basically soften up German trenches and earthworks with our huge kind of artillery guns. So that was a big turning point for me on the home front. And then finally let's just step back from it all and look at the significance of those events then for the home front and for the war generally. Now, as you know, there's tertiary significance, secondary significance and primary significance, and they step up in terms of importance. Tertiary is less important and primary is the most important. So in my mind, this is my kind of analysis of the significance of the home front events. So in terms of tertiary significance, I would say long-term economic and social strain was created on the home front. So financial debt started to rack up. So massive war expenditure forced Britain to borrow heavily from the United States, hence the image of Wall Street. They made a lot of money out of us. Shifting global financial leadership to Wall Street and America, effectively. So the power starts to shift. Devastated communities, though, as well. And I'm not trying to downplay these by saying a tertiary significance, because this was still big. The loss of PALS battalions, where friends all fought together, left whole towns and villages without an entire generation of young men. And you'll see, if you walk around the UK in parks and public places, you will see cenotaphs and kind of monuments to the people who died from World War I, because it affected everybody pretty much. No family was left kind of unaffected, to be honest. So I think it did affect British society in that way, and other Allied nations as well. Secondary significance, the events, I would say it brought the social advancement of women. I think that's massive. So workforce integration. So over 1 million women entered heavy manufacturing, transport and civil service positions previously reserved only for men. So I think that brings women's liberation a step forward. And enfranchisement, women's vital war contributions accelerated the passing of the 1918 Representation of the People Act, because obviously you couldn't morally use women for the war effort and then go, but you're still not having the vote. It's just politically untenable, isn't it? So it brought forward enfranchisement for women, which was a really, really positive step in the democratic countries. But what was the primary significance then? Well, we can debate this. You can have a historical debate about this all day long. But for me, I would say it's this: the total mobilisation of civilian society. So a state-controlled economy now rules. So it transformed free market Britain, as we know, into that centralised government-directed war economy under DORA, or the powers granted by DORA. Even to the point, as we know, of controlling calories and food. And as you can see here, these are kind of rations being and ration cards being kind of issued and things like that. So the state really gets involved, even to the point of controlling what you eat and how much, your calorie intake. So I think it's a massive shift. Also, there's an expansion of state power generally, so it set historic precedents for government intervention into your daily lives. So media, censorship, full economic control, what you eat, when you eat it. It was a massive leap forward in state intervention, which set the scene then for, well, state intervention even into the present day. It set those precedents, whereas previously the government it was very laissez-faire and hadn't really liked to get involved in people's lives at all very much if it could help it. So I think that was a big step change, and that's of primary significance in my book. But there you go. So that has hopefully been a really good primer for you all for the home front and total war and how it affected especially Britain during the Great War. So you can hopefully now step off and kind of start adding to your notes. Obviously, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss another Let's Learn video again. Your support is always really, really appreciated. So please do pop any comments and stuff in the comments box, and we'll always do our best to reply as well. So it just remains to say that is the home front and total war during the Great War. Obviously, keep your eyes peeled for the next instalment of the World War I series. We'll obviously be back very soon. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. Take care and see you soon.